This project came as kind of a response to the issue of food supply and food security. And as we know, the population is expected to increase to about 9.7 billion people by 2050. And at the same time, the area of land that's available for crops remains the same. So currently about 5.1 billion hectares are allocated to food production, and that's 1.1 billion hectares for crops and the rest for livestock. So if we think about ensuring food production or supply for the future, there's a lack of about 2 billion hectares of land to meet the demands of 2050. So how we can accommodate this? If we just think of the land, the options aren't particularly appealing. So we can either replace forests with extra crop areas, which wouldn't work from a sustainability point of view. It would just inevitably lead to worsening the climate crisis through deforestation. And then another option would be highly difficult to implement because it means essentially dramatically shifting our diet to allow for less meat consumption and expand plant crop areas into zones that are currently used for livestock. So we were looking at a possible option 3, and that was to shift from agriculture to aquaculture and expand these crop areas onto the sea. And then also through targeting highly efficient marine species such as microalgae, that would then further decrease the areas necessary for meeting future demand. So considering the current aquaculture techniques and the fact that most of the systems are actually open to the environment at that scale, even though the footprint is decreased, there are still some environmental challenges in terms of mitigating the negative effects of implementing this and upscaling at such a big ratio. So on the other hand, resolving the issue of food supply is not really limited to finding additional areas, but it also revolves around creating food security globally. So for that, we've got to look at what's happening at the moment. And actually, for this reason, and because smallholders, which are located mostly in developing countries, play a key role in global food supply chains, but they're also located in areas where there's great food insecurity. So they might be producing food that helps the local market and helps even the global market, but they themselves might be struggling because of food insecurity. We decided to sort of target the project towards the smallholders in these specific areas. So in a sort of bigger picture, that would help to achieve a balance or to start taking steps towards a balance in food supply globally. Because of the environmental challenges that I mentioned with aquaculture, we were trying to find an example of a working closed-loop agricultural system, and we were looking at the SeaOasis as an example, which is a sustainable closed-loop system. It's driven by smallholders as well. And we wanted to figure out a way how we can transfer and adapt that onto the sea. So essentially, in the land-based oasis, all the ecosystem is centered around the date palm, and it's which is providing, it's filtering light, which allows other species to grow underneath in the shade. It's providing soil stabilization, and then with a little bit of human intervention, it's also helping to manage sort of water infrastructure. So this system is recycling sort of all the waste, and then it's forming at a larger scale a network which was linked originally through trade and sort of travel routes. So we wanted to transfer this onto the sea, and we looked at what is the base species that's kind of the equivalent of the date palm on sea, and we came to the conclusion that that's a microalgae. So instead of filtering sunlight, they're basically filtering water, and also stand at the base of all the other food webs that then depend on them. So in terms of stability and anchoring, in this case, the water buoyancy is providing this stability. So, and then kind of zooming out and thinking again about this network of nodes, by targeting microalgae, actually there's an opportunity to link to a kind of different trade and travel network, which is a high value market. That's the global food market, existing food market. So the system that we came up with is quite a simple setup. It's formed of so one SeaOasis is formed out of 5 to 7 aquapods, as we call them, which are these circular units. So each unit is formed of a base system, which is a basic floating system that uses tractor tires for the floating, and then a network of ropes and buoys that act as a support structure, and a type of submerged photobioreactor for growing the algae. And then the rope system can be quite flexible, so it can be arranged in different configurations, and each configuration works better depending on how the units are used. So how it works is it's essentially the input is seawater. You can add a desalination unit and sort of recycle the brine reject, or even use freshwater species. So we have a fish algae unit on the right top hand side, and then from that unit, the wastewater from the fish is fed into the filter unit where we're growing oysters and seaweeds. They clean the water. The oyster becomes a marketable product. Seaweed is then fed back into the fish algae unit, where it can be used as feed. And then the clean water is then fed into the mixing unit, which is essentially a kind of composting unit for either plant waste or manure or liquid waste. So this is essentially a unit where you're generating fertilizer, and then the result of that is fed back into a hydroponic unit, where you can grow plants. So in this seawater scenario, that would be using halophytic plants, and if using freshwater, then you need a desalination unit to support this. So that's the hydroponic unit. It's basically using the rope and buoy system, and it's using a plant-based floating mat to support the plants. And then this is the filter unit. At the base of this unit is transparent. So it's letting sunlight pass through in terms of minimizing the impact of the pods on the environment. And then we have a system that sort of pumps water or cool water from the lower surfaces of the sea to regulate temperature. And we're also thinking of using these shade balls to also regulate the light levels for growing the algae in the fish algae unit. So we did a kind of initial cost analysis and came up with a couple of configurations that work together in terms of the couples of species and the configuration that you achieve. And then we try to look at it in terms of what's the return time, what kind of risk levels are associated. So for example, you could have a really high market algae species that's super sensitive to environmental conditions, so that creates a higher risk. So looking at that, we then try to identify what would be the impact of this system. So we looked comparatively at the average farm size, household size, and yearly income that's currently happening in Latin America, Caribbean, Africa and Asia. And as you can see, the SeaOasis, all of the configurations are far smaller, so more easy to manage for a 5-person family. And the income would potentially be, for the smallest income, it would be almost double the largest current income for smallholders. So in order to implement this, we try to find sort of different solutions and where would be the best zones to implement this. So we looked at environmental conditions and we came up with this map, which is looking where you have the best sea surface temperature. So the best conditions would be constant year round, and the best light conditions, so getting enough sun to optimally grow the algae. And then that sort of correlates actually with the locations of the smallholder farms. And we've then proposed different locations for the various types of configurations. So based on risk, based on hunger levels or sort of food insecurity levels, based on proximity to existing reverse osmosis plants, so that you can reuse actually the brine from the plants.